Now suppose we want to get a monochromatic painting, okay? So we're going to do the monochromatic option, and we are going to use one color. In this case, we're going to use blue. And we're going to mix the blue with our grays, okay? So this is the blue, purely saturated, meaning there's nothing else in it. It's nothing but blue, okay? And so you can see it reading is kind of lighter as I move it around on here, and that's because you're seeing the reflection of the light from the paper that I'm putting it on top of, okay? So that's an ultramarine blue. An ultramarine blue is kind of a little bit more violet than say a cerulean blue would be. But for the monochromatic option, this would be the way to go, okay? You're gonna have a color like that. And then when you take this color and you mix it with white, that's called a tint. We learned about all this in our design class, hopefully. So you can see that I have now a lighter blue, also less saturated because it's mixed with the white, right? So anytime you mix something with the color, it becomes less saturated. Also mix the color with a value, okay? And the value that, probably a value that would be about like this. That would match the tone of the blue. Because each color has its own value. Maybe a little bit darker than that. So we're going to take this gray and also mix it with the blue. So when you see this, see you have sort of a bluish gray. When you see it on the palette, it looks really blue. When you see it right next to the blue, it doesn't look blue at all, okay? So we can get a range in there. We can add a little bit more blue to it. So that has more blue. Or we can add less. We can also add or use a lighter gray as well. Anytime you're using these mixtures of the hue with gray, these are called tones. And the tones are going to be used in places where you have that you want to recede. Usually the saturated color comes up. So with this, let's put that right next to this and see if you can tell the difference. So if you see them side by side, you can see that this gray appears cooler than that gray, because it is, because it has a little bit more blue in it. But when you see it down here, it looks like it's gray, okay? And then the other thing you can do is you can take the color, the hue, you can mix it with black, which for the monochromatic assignment is about the only time you're ever going to be doing this, because there are going to be things that I'm going to show you about color that are not going to involve black. Black and I are enemies. You wouldn't know it by how I dress, but the idea is when you put black can deaden color very quickly. Okay, so here you can see that's the black by itself, and then there's the black with a little bit of blue in it. But generally shades, these are called shades when you're mixing the hue with the black. Generally when you're dealing with shades, you have the potential for making a mess, okay? For the black polluting all the color, not just the color that you mixed it with, but all the color in the painting. So it's a good thing to avoid it if you can, all right? And there are other things that you can use to make shadows. Like, it seems like an obvious choice to make shadows, but you know, if you really examine a shadow when you're outside, you'll see that the shadow isn't black, okay? The achromatic palette, where we're just dealing with the black, whites, and grays, you know, the grays mixed with black and white, that's an artificial thing. It doesn't really happen in nature. So that we're going to learn how to use other colors to make our grays, okay? So if we're going to do the option of using complements to make our tones, to make our grays, then we're going to be making grays doing that, okay? So let's talk about that. So the complement to blue, since we have blue on our palette, is going to be orange. Now I'm going to need to make an orange because I don't have one in front of me. So I'm going to take a yellow and mix it with a little cadmium red light, okay? Now, the thing that you're going to need to remember about this is, and this is where a color wheel comes in handy. Having a color wheel to match your colors with, or approximate, is a good thing, because you want to make sure that you're not making a yellow orange, or you're not making a red orange. You're making an orange, because if the orange is too red, you might end up making something that looks like that looks purplish, okay, when you're mixing up your complements. And if the orange is too yellow, then you'll be making something that looks kind of green, okay? So this looks like a pretty good orange. Of course, you can take all the guesswork out of it and just buy cadmium orange when you're buying your colors, but you can make a pretty decent orange mixing the cadmium red light and the cad yellow light, or even the cad yellow medium. Okay, so if we take this orange, just put it by itself here. And we mix it with the blue. It's a lot of blue. I want to try to get it kind of equal. That is looking really green. If it looks that green, we might want to have a little bit more red in our orange. That's what I get for mixing color without a color wheel in front of me. Okay, that looks like a red-orange, but it should balance out our tone here. So what we're trying to achieve here is something that doesn't look too blue and something that doesn't look too red, or I'm sorry, too orange. It's sort of an in-between. And this thing that I'm mixing up right here, if any of you are parents or you have younger siblings, you recognize this color. So that's a neutral. The other thing it's called is a tertiary, okay? So when we're mixing our complements together, in this case the orange and the blue, we're making a tertiary, okay? So this is a little bit controversial because sometimes you're going to see design textbooks and design teachers even that call tertiaries something else. They're referring to what I call intermediate colors as tertiaries, and that's incorrect, okay? What I'm saying is correct, okay? So it's a tertiary because tertiary means 3, all right? And so what colors does it have in it? It has all 3 of the primaries. It had the yellow and the red to make the orange, and it had the blue. That's 3 colors to make the tertiary. Whereas an intermediate, say yellow-green, just has the little bit of blue and a lot of yellow, just 2 colors to make yellow-green. So therefore, yellow-green is not a tertiary, yellow-green is an intermediate. All right, so you can see with our tone there, we can get a whole range of those, okay? We can go cooler, we can go warmer, and we can also add white to make it more of a gray. So that gives you a nice warm gray, okay? A tone. And so you can get all different variations in that. You can have something in between those two things. And the other thing you can do is you can push this a little warmer, a little cooler. You're gonna have to do it with this. Went crazy and mixed them all up. So there it is, a little warmer. There it is, a little cooler. So before you attempt the painting, if you're going to choose this option, which is the more complicated option, okay, this is fairly straightforward, where you're using the tones made by mixing your grays with your one hue, so monochromatic. But this, the complementary color scheme, is a little bit more complicated because you get to use in conjunction with these tones that you make, and the majority of it is probably going to be these tones, you're also going to get to use the pure hue, okay, in conjunction with these. So there's going to be wider options, but it is also more complex, okay? So if you're going to do that, you might want to do what I did and experiment a little bit with the color, okay? And then the other thing that you're going to need to remember about that, and this is true of both, okay, both of the options. When you're selecting an image, do not try to select an image that matches your color choices, because it won't, okay? So there's always going to be something that doesn't match, especially if you're doing the monochromatic, right? So if you're doing the monochromatic, you're not going to see everything blue. But when we're doing this and we're mixing up these tones, you know, obviously if I'm using orange and blue, then I'm not going to get to have any greens, or the greens that I'm going to have are going to be kind of murky looking, okay? They're not going to be any bright, vivid greens. Conversely, if I'm using red and green as my complementary pair, I'm not going to have any blue sky, okay? So you're not going to get to match the color of the photo exactly. In fact, if you had a black and white photo, you could probably do this with a lot less angst on your part. But that's the one thing that the students kind of forget, that the exercise is about how to use these tones to get space, okay? The saturated hues coming forward, the muted tones receding, okay? That's what it's about. And it isn't about matching the colors as you see them exactly, okay? It's not about that. Now, you can get, for example, if you had like a beach scene, and that's a pretty decent sand color. So, I mean, you can match some of the colors. You're just not going to be able to match them all, okay? Okay, so hopefully that gives you some insight as to how the two things work, and you can choose either one. And it doesn't matter which. You're not going to get a higher grade if you choose one over the other. But just remember that, you know, if you're an absolute beginner and you don't remember anything about color from your design class, maybe choose that option, okay? If you're a little bit more confident, then you can do the complementary color scheme. Okay,